morning, students. Good morning, everyone. Uh, Today we are taking the course Environmental Change and Natural Resources Conservation. By the way, my name is Dr. Gabriel Arome Ataguba from the CIPES program, Federal University of Agriculture, Makodi. So, moving forward, this module is going to bring you the causes and types of global environmental change, which we'll abbreviate as GEC, the impacts on natural resources and ecosystems, and then we'll explore the mitigation and adaptation strategies that should be done in order to take care of the impacts of the environmental changes that we have induced. Now, at the end of the course, you will be able to itemize the causes and types of global environmental change. You should also be able to enumerate what makes up environmental flow, and then you should catalog Nigeria's natural resource conservation challenges and strategies. So moving forward, we'll start first with global environmental change. So what is global environmental change? It is actually any significant and widespread alteration, okay, that affects the Earth's natural systems. And this can either be natural or artificial, that is man-made. Now, they impact our planet ecosystem. It also impacts our climate. It impacts biodiversity, and then all the natural resources that we have in our environment, with severe implications for us as human beings, especially our livelihoods. Now, there are two drivers that can affect or that drive environmental change. One of them is natural, and the other one is artificial or man-made anthropogenic factors. Now, also, climate change is one of them, but it's more or less like an artificial driver because it is caused by human beings as well. So, these environmental changes can be seen in terms of biodiversity loss, okay? And that means that we have a reduced number of species in our environment. We also have land use and land cover changes. We have pollution and oceanic and marine changes, as well as climate change itself, which is a long-term alteration in temperature, precipitation patterns, and wind or patterns in the Earth's climate system. Now, it is mostly driven by human activity, and this means that we are the drivers of climate change. And how do we do this? We tend to load the environment or our climate with greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, even fluorinated gases that are used for refrigeration. Some of them have been banned, mostly also caused by natural sources, including volcanic eruptions, and this brings about the deposition of organic matter and then oceanic releases. Now, environmental change, our climate change itself affects us a lot, and this affects us in terms of our health because we tend to develop health-related issues as climate change progresses. It leads to the spread of diseases. It affects our air quality, the air we breathe. It affects our food and water, and also affects our mental health, as we can see. So moving forward, we'll now look at environmental flow, which is part of the natural resources that we have. Environmental flow basically deals with the quantity, timing, and quality of water flow that is required to sustain freshwater and estuarine ecosystems that support all our livelihoods as we are dependent on the natural systems. So that means we need to have a balance between ecological integrity and then the way we utilize the water resources in our environment. So environmental flow is significant because it affects ecosystem health, it affects biodiversity conservation, it affects water security. It also has to do with climate change and then mitigation and adaptation of climate change itself. We also have to understand environmental flow because it makes us to prevent ecosystem degradation, and then also it has economic and cultural benefits. So most importantly, the environmental flow is important because we have, as a global community, we have the responsibility of joining forces with every other country in the world in order to sustain development. And this is why water and sanitation is part of the Sustainable Development Goals, as we can see, Goal 6 thereof. Now, components of environmental flow, like we said before, includes the quantity, that's the volume of water that we have that we can sustain, that can sustain us as human beings in the system, the timing of the flow, okay, the quality of the flow. This affects the use of water in our environment. Environmental flow is also affected by a variety of natural and human factors. These factors are the ones that determine how much water we have, the time we are able to get the water or remove the water for our use, and then the quality of the water that flows in the environment. The natural factors affecting environmental flow include climate, geology or topography as we know it. The lower parts of the Earth's crust are the ones where water would always settle. Then seasonal cycles. We are now in the dry season. Surely there is no rain. So in the rainy season, rains come, and in the dry season, rains cease. Now ecosystem interactions. Vegetation and soil types tend to modify the water in the environment, because once there is vegetation, transpiration occurs, and that also tends to release water into the atmosphere. Now, the human-induced factors that affect environmental flow includes water abstraction. Now that it's getting to the peak of the dry season, we begin to see that there is increased activity with regards to the drilling of boreholes. Infrastructure development. We construct dams, we construct reservoirs. These tend to affect the flow of water from one place to another. Most importantly, one of the anthropogenic factors that affect what environmental flow is pollution, because we discharge pollutants from our industrial activities, even from agriculture and other domestic sources into the water that we use, into the environment. Moving further, another cause of changes or of environmental flow is deforestation and land use changes, because we take trees from the forest to make paper, we take trees from the forest to make furniture and other things. So it increases the surface runoff because there is nothing in the environment or on the soil to break the flow of water. And climate change also affects the water flow, because there will be droughts and then there will be floods and extreme weather events such as we experience in several parts of the world of recent. So there are factors that also influence the environmental flow that are socioeconomic and policy related. One of them is competing water demands, because several industries demand water. So there's always that conflict, so that needs to be balanced. Then secondly, governance and regulation. We have weak structures that need to be strengthened so that we can have stronger water management. Economic development also affects water flow. Cultural practices and traditions as well also affects the environmental flow that we have. Other factors include technology and management, and then this is also directly related to monitoring and data availability, so that we can use innovative technologies like remote sensing, predictive modeling, and AI to improve the flow of water in the environment as well as its management. So how does an altered flow affect our ecosystem and then even the human system? Generally, this slide here summarizes what would happen if there is an alteration in environmental flow. So there is always an ecosystem disruption, there is reduced water supply, and then there is increased conflict because people are looking for water that is readily not available. So we move on to natural resources and wildlife conservation as well as land use systems in Nigeria. So there are various natural resources that are available in Nigeria, and there are mineral resources, agricultural resources, livestock, forestry, and fisheries that we have within the Nigerian environment. We have key wildlife within Nigeria, including the African elephant, Cross River gorilla, and then the Nigerian Cameroon chimpanzee. These are iconic species that are available within the Cross River National Park, as well as the Yankari Games Reserve and other national parks within the country. So the natural resources in Nigeria are used in several ways. Okay, agricultural land use is one of them. Then we also use our natural resources to improve infrastructure and then create urban centers within the country. Then we use our natural resources from forestry to be able to uh, clear the land, and then we log, and we use them for other things, as well as using the land itself for agriculture. So, but this leads to biodiversity loss and reduced carbon storage. Then this brings up the idea of conservation land use. In as much as we have the natural resources, we also, as a country, have been trying to conserve these resources by setting up national parks, game reserves, and then other community-based conservation projects to manage the resources. So there's a very important thing we ought to see here is resource dependency, because in the rural areas, communities, people in the communities are dependent on the environment for survival. So there's farming activity going on, there's fishing activity going on, and there's also the collection of firewood. This destroys the forest as well. So there's natural resource extraction also affects wildlife, because when we change the land use, we affect the nature environment where the wildlife would thrive. So there's always a considerable conversion of forests for agricultural purpose, and this has led to loss of habitat as well as fragmentation. So we need to balance development and conservation as we move forward. So there are two types of natural resources that are available in the country. We have the renewable natural resources, those ones that can be replenished with time, and then the non-renewable natural resources, those that will not be replenishable within a very short period of time. Now, in Nigeria, we are faced with various challenges to the natural resources and wildlife conservation efforts, including deforestation, overexploitation of resources, pollution, climate change, inadequate policies, and enforcement. Now, most importantly, the inadequate policies and enforcement is human related, because it has to do with government and the structures that are supposed to manage the natural resources. So most regulations in Nigeria are weak, and this tend to hinder the implementation of the environmental laws. And then corruption and weak governance also affects our efforts to conserve natural resources. We have insufficient resources in terms of finance to be able to monitor and then manage, as well as carry out research that will be able to lead us into better natural resource management strategies. Now, our efforts at natural resource management include the establishment of national parks and reserves, including the Yankari Game Reserve, the Cross River National Park, the Kainji Lake National Park, among others. Now, this benefits us because we are able to better preserve the biodiversity in our environment, and then also the habitats in the environment for the endangered species. There is also the community-based conservation efforts. This one has to do with the role of the locals or the members of communities in the local or rural areas, aimed at conserving their own natural resources. So there's also community-based projects, including forest management committees, and then the sustainable livelihood programs. These, as a whole, are meant to empower communities so that they can take ownership of their own resources and conservation efforts. Then natural resources management in Nigeria also encompasses sustainable agriculture, including agroforestry, conservation tillage, integrated pest management that would limit the use of uh, pesticides within the environment. So we have improved food security while we are also conserving biodiversity. So another effort at conservation of natural resources include reforestation and afforestation. So reforestation means that we are re-establishing the forest. Afforestation means starting afresh, or they are community-driven tree planting campaigns. Now, this enhances carbon sequestration that can also mitigate climate change. We have established or enacted wildlife protection laws, including the Endangered Species Act 1985, the National Parks Act 1991, and several other forestry laws that are aim to regulate logging and then promote sustainable forest management. So, um, natural resources management in Nigeria can be carried out through the use of technology, including geospatial technologies. We can also monitor land use changes with these technologies and then map our biodiversity and then better manage disaster and our water resources once we're able to apply technologies like GIS, remote sensing, and then the GPS system. This will collect and analyze spatial data. So we are also involved in the uh, establishment of renewable energy projects, solar energy projects in solar farms within northern Nigeria. One important project of such under such category is the federal government hybrid solar grid for 16 universities, which includes the Federal University of Agriculture, Makodi. It's a FUAM. We are also trying in Nigeria because we have a lot of investment in hydroelectric power development. So then as well as wind energy projects that are found in the northern parts of Nigeria, for instance, in Katsina State, where they exist. So given the fact that Nigeria is in itself within the global community, we are also involved in the conservation of our own natural resources by aligning with the trends in the global community. So including the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, we are signatory to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We're also involved in Global Environmental Facility, as well as the African Union's Green Wall Initiative, which is one of the largest projects in the world or on Earth today. Now, we are also involved in eco-friendly development projects within Nigeria, ecotourism. You can see that in Yankari Game Reserve. We also are looking at making it possible for the payment for ecosystem services as well as community empowerment. These actions are actions that are geared towards natural resources management as well as conservation in the country. Most importantly, education and awareness creates a panacea for young Nigerians to be able to manage the resources better. So when we incorporate environmental science and conservation topics into our primary and secondary school curricula, we create greater opportunities for the younger ones to be able to manage the resources as they get older. And then we also need to, we are also involved actively in community outreach programs. We use media and technology. We have campaigns that go with advertisements on television and other media. Then in Nigeria, there are also partnerships with non-governmental organizations that tend to drive natural resources management and conservation. Then, lastly, there is need for sustainable land use planning, and this involves the zoning for conservation and development. It is very important for us to have zones that are protected, especially areas like the mangrove forests that need to be protected from urban expansion, especially in the Niger Delta area. Then there's also need for integrated land use management so that we can balance agricultural needs, forestry, and then urbanization so that we have a holistic approach. Then we also need to look at the restoration of degraded lands so that lands that have been damaged by mining and logging and other things can be reforested. Then climate smart land use practices. This will also involve the use of technology so that we can adopt strategies to conserve agriculture, reforestation, and water efficient irrigation. This all put together will enable us to be able to manage the natural resources in Nigeria and create an environment where our natural resources are readily conserved. Thank you very much.